My name is Sarah, I'm 27, and I've always been the family disappointment who couldn't meet my mother's expectations. The day she caught me on my knees praying, something she thought was beneath our educated family, her laughter cut deeper than any criticism she'd ever given me. I still remember the sound echoing off the walls of my bedroom. Not a gentle chuckle, but the kind of laugh that dismisses everything you are. The kind that makes you question if you've been living a lie. Prayer? Really, Sarah? I thought we raised you better than that, she said, leaning against my doorframe with that look of intellectual superiority I'd grown to fear. What's next? Healing crystals? Tarot cards? I didn't respond. I couldn't. Years of hiding this part of myself collapsed in that single moment of exposure. What she didn't know, what she couldn't possibly understand, was that those prayers had been the invisible thread holding our family together when everything was falling apart. That night changed everything between us, not because of what she said, but because of what I finally had the courage to tell her. A truth so raw and unexpected that it broke through 30 years of her carefully constructed walls. Sometimes the most powerful moments in our lives come when we're finally pushed to reveal the secrets we've been protecting others from, even when those others are the people who should have been protecting us. The moment of mockery. It was a Tuesday evening in November, the kind where darkness falls too early and the house feels too quiet. Mom had come home from her university department meeting early, something that never happened. I hadn't heard her key in the lock, hadn't registered her footsteps on the stairs. For 3 years, I'd been careful. Prayer was my private sanctuary, something I did when the house was empty, or behind a locked bathroom door with the shower running to mask any whispered words. But that night, something in me needed more than whispers. I needed to physically kneel, to feel the hardwood floor against my knees as a reminder that some burdens are too heavy to carry standing. When the door swung open, I was mid-sentence, asking for strength I didn't have on my own. The look on her face transformed from surprise to amusement to something worse, disappointment. What exactly do you think that's going to accomplish? She stepped fully into my room without asking, without caring that she was intruding on something intimate. Who are you even talking to? I scrambled to my feet, feeling like a child caught doing something shameful. Mom, No, really, I'm curious. Her voice had that academic tone she used when dissecting flawed arguments in her lectures. You have a master's degree in biochemistry, Sarah. You understand how the universe actually works. So please, enlighten me. What possible difference could kneeling on the floor talking to yourself make? Every word was precisely calibrated to make me feel foolish, to remind me that in our family, reason reigned supreme, and anything that couldn't be proven in a laboratory was beneath consideration. It helps me, was all I could manage. She laughed again, softer this time, but somehow more cutting. Helps you what? Feel better about your life choices? About throwing away that research position to work at that nonprofit? About still living at home at your age? There it was, the real issue. Not my prayers, but what she saw as my failures. My prayers were just convenient evidence of my inadequacy in her eyes. You know what would actually help you? Making rational decisions, having a plan. Not, she gestured dismissively at the space where I'd been kneeling. Whatever this regression is. She left without closing the door, her point made. The silent message clear. Your privacy isn't worth protecting when you're doing something this absurd. I sat on the edge of my bed, hands shaking. For 3 years, I'd kept this part of my life hidden from her. 3 years of finding strength in something she couldn't understand or quantify. 3 years of prayers that had sustained me through the darkest period of our family's life. A darkness she had no idea I'd helped carry. That night, I didn't pray again. I couldn't. The sacred space had been violated, turned into something shameful by her mockery. But as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, something shifted inside me. A realization that I'd been protecting her from a truth she deserved to hear, and maybe it was time to stop. Our complicated history. To understand why my mother's laughter cuts so deep, you need to know who Dr. Eleanor Mitchell is. A tenured professor of evolutionary biology with 3 published books and a reputation for intellectual rigor that borders on ruthlessness. My mother doesn't merely believe in science, She wields it like a weapon against anything that suggests the world might be more complex than what can be measured in a test tube. Growing up in our household meant dinner conversations about recent journal publications rather than how your day went. It meant being taught to question everything, except her worldview. My father, a gentle mathematician who found beauty in abstract patterns, provided some balance until their divorce when I was 15. After that, it was just Mom and me in a house full of books, but somehow empty of wonder. Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, she would remind me whenever I'd express interest in anything spiritual. This wasn't merely her professional stance, it was personal. Her own parents had been deeply religious, using faith as an excuse for emotional neglect and harsh discipline. She'd escaped that household through academic achievement, vowing never to let irrationality govern her life or her child's. I was expected to follow in her footsteps, and for most of my life, I did. I excelled in science, graduated top of my class, and was on track for a prestigious research career. But something always felt missing, a hollow space inside me that equations couldn't fill. The tension between us began when I took a position at a nonprofit focused on bringing clean water to rural communities instead of accepting a well-funded lab position she'd helped secure. Wasting your potential, she called it. What she really meant was betraying the path she'd laid out for me. Living at home after graduate school wasn't my first choice, but with student loans and nonprofit wages, it made financial sense. For Mom, it was further evidence of my poor decision-making and another opportunity to shape me back into the daughter she wanted. What she never knew was that my spiritual journey began during those silent nights in our shared home. It started not with religious texts or grand revelations, but with simple, desperate whispers into the darkness when hope seemed distant. Prayers born not of indoctrination, but of an innate human need to believe we're not alone in our suffering. I hid this part of myself because I knew exactly how she would react. I'd seen her eviscerate colleagues who mentioned faith, watched her systematically dismantle the beliefs of door-to-door missionaries brave enough to ring our bell. Her intellect was a precision instrument for cutting through what she saw as delusion. But the irony, the painful, beautiful irony she didn't know, was that my prayers had begun because of her, for her, when everything she believed about the ordered, rational universe was threatened in the most personal way possible. The distance between us grew with each passing month. Every conversation became a potential minefield of disappointment, every achievement measured against what might have been. And all the while, I carried a secret that could bridge the gap between us, or destroy what little connection remained. Until that Tuesday night, when her laughter forced a decision I'd been avoiding for 3 long years. The breaking point. After Mom left my room that night, I sat in silence for nearly an hour. The weight of her mockery hung in the air, but something else was building inside me, a pressure that had been accumulating for years. Each dismissive comment, each disappointed glance, each comparison to the daughter I should have been had created a reservoir of unspoken truths between us. That night, the dam finally broke. I found her in the living room, glasses perched on her nose, reviewing student papers with a red pen poised like a scalpel. The familiar scene, her creating order through criticism, sparked something in me I hadn't felt before. Not shame, not hurt, but anger, pure, clarifying anger. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. She didn't look up immediately. "If this is about earlier, I don't think there's much to discuss. You're entitled to your coping mechanisms, however ineffective they might be." Coping mechanisms. I repeated the word slowly. "Is that what you think prayer is for me?" Now she looked up, registering the unusual tone in my voice. "What would you call it?" A rational person doesn't speak to an empty room expecting answers. I moved closer, standing directly across from her. "And a loving mother doesn't mock her daughter when she's on her knees?" Her eyebrows raised slightly, the only indication that my words had landed. "I wasn't mocking you, Sarah. I was expressing concern. This sudden turn toward spirituality seems like regression, not growth." "Sudden?" The word escaped as a bitter laugh. "Mom, there's nothing sudden about it. I've been praying every day for 3 years." She set down her pen, giving me her full attention now. 3 years? Since when have you... Since your diagnosis. The two words hung between us like a physical presence. Her diagnosis. The thing we never discussed anymore. The period of our lives that had been carefully filed away, categorized as resolved, and therefore not requiring further examination. Her expression shifted, that familiar analytical mind working to process this new information. That was a difficult time for both of us. People often turn to irrational beliefs when faced with mortality. But that's over now. I'm fine. We moved past it. You moved past it, I corrected, feeling a tremor in my hands that I couldn't control. I never did. Because while you were sleeping through those nights in the hospital, someone had to stay awake. While you were focusing on your treatment protocols and survival statistics, someone had to carry hope when there wasn't any left in that sterile room. Her face paled slightly. Sarah, I appreciate that my illness was hard on you too. But, hard? The word came out louder than I intended. It wasn't hard, Mom. It was impossible. Do you know what the oncologist told me when you were sedated after your second surgery? Do you know what conversations were happening while you were unconscious? She sat perfectly still now, her papers forgotten. No, you don't know, because I never told you. Because I was protecting you. Just like I protected you from seeing me fall apart every single day. Just like I protected you from the truth about how close we came to losing everything. I could see her scientific mind trying to regain control, to find logical footing in this emotional terrain. Sarah, medical prognoses are often conservative. Doctors prepare for worst-case scenarios. Stop. I held up my hand. Just stop analyzing for 1 minute and listen. Tonight you laughed at the one thing that kept me sane during the worst period of my life. The one thing that gave me strength when I had none left. And I'm done pretending it didn't matter. I'm done hiding the truth from you. Something shifted in her eyes then. Not understanding yet, but the first crack in that impenetrable intellectual armor. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, she didn't immediately have a response prepared. And in that moment of silence, I knew there was no turning back. The truth I'd been protecting her from was about to change everything between us, for better or worse. The untold story. Stage 4. The words fell between us like stones. That's what they told me while you were still unconscious after the second surgery. Not stage 2 like they initially thought. Not stage 3 like they suspected during the first operation. Stage 4, with metastasis to the liver. Mom's hands tightened around her pen. I could see her wanting to interrupt, to correct me with the sanitized version of events she'd been told. But something in my expression kept her silent. Dr. Reinhardt took me into that small consultation room, the one with the fake plant in the corner and the box of tissues that's always full. He showed me the scans they hadn't shown you, the ones they took while you were under anesthesia. I sat down across from her, my legs suddenly unable to support my weight. 8%, Mom. That's the survival rate he quoted for your specific situation. 8%. Not the 45% they told you later. Not the good chances they discussed during your follow-ups. Her face had gone completely pale now, her academic composure fracturing. That can't be right. My oncology team was very clear about. They were clear with you about what they thought you could handle, I said quietly. But I was your healthcare proxy. I was the one they legally had to tell everything to while you were incapacitated. I was 24 years old, sitting alone in that room, being told to prepare for your death. The memory of that moment washed over me. The sterile smell of the hospital. The doctor's practiced sympathetic expression. The sensation of the world collapsing inward. They gave me options. Aggressive experimental treatments that might extend your life by months, but would make those months unbearable. Palliative care to keep you comfortable during what time remained. Or a standard protocol with minimal chances but fewer side effects. They needed decisions within 48 hours. Mom set down her pen, her hand visibly trembling. You never told me any of this. When you woke up, the first thing you said was that you weren't going to let this disease defeat you. You started talking about survival rates and treatment protocols like it was one of your research projects. You were so certain, so determined. I swallowed hard. I couldn't take that away from you. That certainty was keeping you alive. I stood up again, unable to remain still with these memories surging through me. So every night after you fell asleep, I would slip out of your hospital room and find the chapel on the 3rd floor. It was always empty at 3 a.m. I'd kneel on that hard floor, just like you found me tonight, and I would pray for hours. Not elegant prayers, not theological masterpieces, just the same words over and over. Please don't take her. Please don't take her yet. Mom's eyes followed me as I paced. During the day, I was the daughter you expected me to be. Rational, researching clinical trials, questioning doctors, tracking your medication schedules. But at night, I became someone else. Someone desperate enough to beg an entity I wasn't sure existed for a miracle I didn't believe was possible. I stopped and faced her directly. And then something happened that I couldn't explain. After your 3rd round of treatment, they did another scan. The metastasis in your liver had reduced by 60%. Dr. Reinhardt called it unexpected and statistically anomalous. 2 more rounds, and it was gone completely. The primary tumor responded better than anyone predicted. Your blood markers normalized. That was the treatment working, she said automatically. But her voice lacked its usual conviction. The treatment that had an 8% success rate for your condition. The protocol that Dr. Reinhardt himself told me was mostly to give us more time to say goodbye. I shook my head. Maybe it was the treatment. Maybe it was random chance. Maybe it was simply that your body defied the odds in a way science can't fully explain yet. I don't know. I kneeled down in front of her chair, bringing myself to eye level. But here's what I do know. Those nights in the chapel kept me from falling apart completely. Those prayers gave me strength to be what you needed during the day. When you called me your rock, when you said you couldn't have gotten through it without me, you had no idea that every ounce of that strength came from those hours on my knees. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. I had never seen my mother cry, not even during her diagnosis. For 3 years I've kept praying, not because I'm irrational or regressing or weak, but because during the worst moment of my life, I found something that helped me carry a burden that was too heavy to bear alone. And tonight, you laughed at it. The silence between us stretched, filled with 3 years of unspoken truths. Why didn't you tell me? She finally whispered. Any of it? Because you needed to believe you beat cancer through science and determination. Because that's who you've always been. And because I was afraid of exactly what happened tonight. That you would dismiss the one thing that saved me when I was drowning. In that moment, something shifted between us. The carefully constructed reality my mother had built, where everything had unfolded exactly as she understood it, began to crumble beneath the weight of the truth. The truth revealed, Mom set her papers aside completely and removed her glasses, a gesture I'd rarely seen. Without them, she looked suddenly vulnerable, her eyes unshielded. Tell me everything, she said quietly. I need to know what actually happened. So I did. I told her about the night nurse, Elaine, who found me collapsed in the hallway after that first devastating consultation. How Elaine had guided me to the chapel when I couldn't breathe through my panic. I described the coldness of the floor against my knees and the strange comfort it provided, a physical discomfort that anchored me when everything else was spinning out of control. I told her about the bargains I made in that chapel, promising to be better, to be stronger, to be whatever the universe needed me to be if only she could be spared. How sometimes I would talk to God, sometimes to the universe, sometimes to nothing at all, just sending desperate pleas into the void. Remember when Dr. Reinhardt came in with those test results? How shocked he looked, I asked her. She nodded slowly. He pulled me aside afterward. He said, "In 30 years of oncology, I've seen a handful of cases that defy explanation. This is one of them." He told me that medicine is as much art as science, and that sometimes the human spirit contributes in ways we don't fully understand. Mom's brow furrowed. He never said anything like that to me. Because he knew who you were. He knew you needed data, not mystery. I described the calendar I kept hidden in my desk drawer, marking each day of her remission with a small cross. How I'd continued praying long after she was declared cancer-free, afraid that if I stopped, somehow the disease would return. The night before each of your follow-up scans, I don't sleep, I admitted. I pray until sunrise. Every clean scan feels like another answered prayer. As I spoke, I watched her expression transform. The intellectual dismissal gave way to something more complex. Confusion, then hurt, then a dawning realization. "All this time," she whispered, "I thought I knew what happened. I thought I understood my own story. You understood the version I thought you needed." She stood up suddenly, walking to the window, her back to me, shoulders tight. "Do you know what I remember most from that time?" she asked, her voice strained. "Not the pain, not the treatments. I remember waking up in the middle of the night and seeing you asleep in that horrible hospital chair, still holding my hand. I remember thinking how impossibly strong you were, never breaking down, never showing fear." She turned back to face me. "I told my colleagues about you, how my brilliant, rational daughter was handling everything with such remarkable composure. I was so proud of how you embodied everything I'd taught you about facing adversity with clear-eyed determination." A tear slipped down her cheek, the first I'd ever seen her shed. "But that wasn't the whole truth, was it? While I was celebrating your rational strength, you were on your knees in a chapel. While I was telling everyone how you never faltered, you were falling apart where I couldn't see." Her voice broke on the last word. "I failed you, Sarah. Not just tonight. For 3 years. For your entire life, maybe." I started to protest, but she held up her hand. "No, let me finish. I've spent my career teaching students to question assumptions, to examine evidence, to revise their understanding when new information emerges. And yet I've been so certain about how the world works that I never questioned whether my certainty was costing you something essential." She came back to sit across from me, reaching for my hands. "You carried both of us through the worst experience of our lives, and I never even knew the true weight of what you were bearing, or the source of your strength." Her fingers tightened around mine. "Tonight I laughed at the very thing that helped you survive. That may have helped me survive. How can you ever forgive that?" The question hung between us, raw, honest, unguarded in a way nothing between us had ever been. This brilliant woman who had answers for everything was asking a question she didn't know how to resolve. And in that moment, I realized something had fundamentally changed. The truth hadn't destroyed our relationship. It had created the possibility of something new, something real. "Mom," I said softly, "I didn't tell you this to make you feel guilty. I told you because I'm tired of living divided, of being one person with you and another person alone. I told you because even though we see the world differently, I need you to see me, all of me." Another tear slipped down her cheek, then another, the dam of her composure breaking just as mine had earlier. "I see you now," she whispered. "I just don't know where we go from here." Transformation. The first change came the following morning. I found Mom at the kitchen table, coffee untouched, staring at her laptop screen. She looked like she hadn't slept. "I've been reading," she said without preamble, "about spiritual practices in healthcare settings. There are peer-reviewed studies on the psychological benefits of prayer during medical crises." That was my mother's language. Peer-reviewed studies, psychological benefits, evidence-based observations. She was trying to build a bridge from her world to mine, the only way she knew how. "You don't have to do that," I said gently. "I do, though." She closed her laptop. "Sarah, I've been thinking about what you said all night. About carrying burdens alone. About finding strength in something I dismissed." She hesitated. Would you show me?" "Show you what?" "How you pray. What it means to you." The words seemed difficult for her to form. "I want to understand." That evening we sat in my room, the same space where she had laughed just 24 hours earlier. But everything was different now. I explained that prayer for me wasn't about theological doctrines or religious rules. It was simpler, more primal. "It's about acknowledging that I'm not enough on my own," I told her. "That some burdens are too heavy, some questions too vast, some pain too deep to face alone." Her scientific mind wanted structure, methodology. "But who are you talking to? What do you believe is listening?" I smiled. "Sometimes I don't know. Sometimes it feels like the universe, sometimes like something more personal. I don't think the name matters as much as the reaching out." This concept visibly challenged her, but instead of dismissing it, she asked more questions. Real questions, not the kind designed to expose flaws in reasoning. For the first time in my adult life, My mother was approaching me as a source of knowledge, rather than someone to be corrected. 3 days later, she knocked on my door before leaving for the university. "I have a follow-up scan today," she said. I froze. Her quarterly scans were marked on my calendar, but she had never acknowledged that I tracked them, that I worried about them, that each one brought back the terror of those hospital nights. "I know," I said carefully. "I wondered if you might want to come with me." Her voice was hesitant. "And maybe, before we go in, we could stop by the chapel." The significance of this request wasn't lost on either of us. This wasn't just about accompanying her to an appointment. This was Eleanor Mitchell, renowned evolutionary biologist, champion of empirical evidence, asking to participate in something she had spent a lifetime dismissing. The hospital chapel was empty when we arrived, just as it had been during those late nights 3 years ago. Mom stood awkwardly at the entrance, clearly uncomfortable but determined. "I don't know what to do," she admitted. "There's no correct procedure," I assured her. "Just be present, honest." We sat side by side in the simple wooden chairs. I closed my eyes, finding that familiar centered place within myself. After a moment, I felt her hand reach for mine. "I don't know if anyone's listening," she whispered, "but thank you for my daughter. Thank you for her strength when I had none. Thank you for whatever happened 3 years ago that neither science nor I can fully explain." A simple prayer. Awkward, uncertain, genuine. In that moment, something healed between us that had been broken long before her cancer, a divide that had separated us since my childhood. Her scan was clear, as were all the ones that followed. But something else had changed, something more fundamental than medical results. Over the following months, our relationship transformed. Not because she suddenly adopted my perspective or I abandoned the value of rational thought, but because we'd found a way to honor both. She began asking about my work at the nonprofit, real questions about the communities we served, the lives we impacted. I found myself more interested in her research, now that it wasn't presented as the only valid pursuit. We discovered a middle ground where her empirical approach and my intuitive one could coexist, even complement each other. 6 months after that night, Mom surprised me by announcing she'd added a new component to her university course on evolutionary biology. A section on the limitations of scientific explanation, she told me. On the spaces between what we can prove and what we experience. On the value of multiple ways of understanding the world. Her colleagues were baffled by this addition from someone who had built her career on empirical certainty. But her students responded with unexpected enthusiasm. In allowing space for mystery alongside methodology, she had created room for more complete conversations. One evening, I overheard her on the phone with a colleague whose wife had just been diagnosed with breast cancer. "The science matters," she was saying. "The treatments matter. But don't discount the intangibles. Don't dismiss what you can't measure. And whatever you do, don't face this alone." After she hung up, she caught me listening and smiled. A genuine smile, untainted by academic distance or judgment. "I'm still not sure what I believe," she admitted, "but I'm certain of what I know. That night when you told me the truth, it changed everything. It's been 2 years since that night when my mother laughed at my prayers, and then cried when she learned their true meaning. 2 years of building something new between us. Not perfect, not without disagreements, but authentic in a way I never thought possible. Last month, she received her 5-year cancer-free milestone. The statistical improbability that once defined her case has now become part of her medical record, a reminder that sometimes life defies our most educated predictions. We marked the occasion together, not with champagne or celebration, but with a quiet evening of reflection. As we sat in her garden watching the sunset, she asked me a question that would have been unimaginable in our previous life. "Do you think there are some truths that exist beyond what we can prove?" Coming from Eleanor Mitchell, this question represented a seismic shift, not a complete abandonment of her scientific worldview, but the creation of space beside it, room for mystery, for wonder, for the unexplainable. "I think the most important truths often live in that space," I answered. She nodded thoughtfully. "I've been thinking about what happened in that hospital, about statistical anomalies and unexpected recoveries, about strength that comes from sources we don't fully understand. She turned to face me directly. Science has given me a framework for understanding the world. It's given me tools to solve problems and answer questions. But it didn't teach me how to face mortality. It didn't show me how to find hope when the data offered none. You found that somewhere else, and it sustained both of us. This acknowledgement, this validation of my experience, meant more than any academic achievement ever could. Looking back, I realize now that the night my mother laughed at my prayer life wasn't just about spiritual differences. It was about the masks we wear with those closest to us, the parts of ourselves we hide, thinking we're protecting others, when really we're preventing the very connections that might heal us. For years, I thought strength meant carrying burdens silently. I thought love meant shielding my mother from difficult truths. I believed our differences were unbridgeable chasms rather than opportunities for growth. I was wrong on all counts. Real strength comes from vulnerability, from the courage to kneel when standing becomes too difficult. True love isn't about protection through deception, but about holding space for someone's whole reality, even when it differs from your own. And our differences, when approached with genuine curiosity rather than judgment, can become the foundation for deeper understanding. My mother and I still see the world differently. She approaches life through the lens of empirical evidence, while I remain open to experiences that can't be measured or quantified. But we've learned that these perspectives need not be in opposition. They can exist side by side, even complement each other, when held with humility instead of certainty. The prayer that changed everything wasn't the one my mother laughed at. It wasn't any specific words whispered in a hospital chapel during desperate nights. It was the underlying truth those prayers represented, that sometimes we need to reach beyond ourselves to find the strength to continue. That connection, whether to something transcendent or simply to our deeper selves, can sustain us when nothing else can. I don't know if my prayers changed my mother's medical outcome. I can't prove that, and I don't need to. What I know with certainty is that they changed me. They gave me strength when I had none. They provided hope when statistics offered despair. They created a space where I could be broken and still somehow whole. And when I finally found the courage to share that truth, they changed my mother too. Not by converting her to my beliefs, but by opening her to the possibility that some human experiences transcend our ability to explain them. If you're carrying burdens alone, if you're hiding parts of yourself from those you love most, if you're afraid that revealing your authentic self might shatter your most important relationships, I hope our story offers some encouragement. The truths we fear sharing are often the very ones that can set us free. The differences we try to hide are frequently the sources of our greatest growth. And sometimes, the things others mock in us are precisely what they need most in their own lives. They just don't know it yet.